Flanked by a stunning rocky coastline, MotoGP has rocked up to the jaw-dropping Phillip Island for round 17 in 2024. Fast and flowing, Phillip Island is one of racing's biggest adrenaline rushes and is the host venue of the Australian Grand Prix for the 28th time. A tourist hotspot welcoming over 3 million visitors a year. We're ready for a sprint spectacle at a spectacular location. It's time for MotoGP. So what more can be said about this wonderful Phillip Island circuit? 4.44 kilometres length, just under 2.8 miles, 12 corners, 5 of them right, 7 of them left, so many of them named, of course, after Australian motorsport royalty. Down the start-finish straight, the Gardner Straight, named after 1987 500cc world champion Wayne Gardner, into turn 1, the Doohan corner. 5 times world champion Aussie legend Mick Doohan present here this weekend. Turn 3, what a sweep that is, through the Stoner corner into the hard braking zone for turn 4, the Miller corner, turn 6 Siberia, through the high-speed sector 3, including the run towards Lukey Heights, and then sector 4, just 3 corners, turns 10, 11 and 12. Turn 10, 1 and 3 heavy braking zones here in Australia, including turn 1 and turn 4. And you've got to be careful managing that rear tyre, particularly over the full race distance here tomorrow. Well, turns 1, turns 2 into the southern loop, turn 4 and turn 10 offer up the overtaking hotspots. This was right at the end of that classic Australian Grand Prix 1 year ago, when Johann Zarco at turn 4 got on the inside of Jorge Martin to win his first Grand Prix. So 13 days ago in the Motegi Mountains of Japan, it was Pedro Acosta flying away from pole position, the 3rd youngest rider in history to start a Premier Class Grand Prix from pole position. He was hotly pursued by the factory Ducatis of Enea Bastianini and Pecco Bagnaia, trying to hunt down the world champion. Acosta, having crashed out of the lead in the sprint 24 hours earlier, then crashed out of 2nd place in the Japanese Grand Prix. Jorge Martin had work to do, coming from the 11th place on the grid. He did a rousing recovery to come over the line in 2nd place, but it was Pecco Bagnaia who completed his 4th double victory of the season. The world champion on the prowl. Pecco just 10 points behind Jorge Martin as we come into this pivotal 17th round of the World Championship on what has been a weather-hit weekend, as always, here in Phillip Island. It's the Qatar Airways Grand Prix of Australia, the next chapter in this enthralling story which is captivating fans all around the world. What a beautiful sight that is as we look close to the spectacular Phillip Island rugged coastline, the beautiful beaches. Surf's up, and very shortly revs and pressure will be up as we get set for the 13-lap Tissot Sprint, as we get set for a milestone day in Australian Grand Prix history. The first time we will have sprint Saturday action here at Phillip Island, and sporting a very beautiful home race helmet is Jack Miller. That has been designed by his wife Ruby, celebrating all the things that they love about Australia. There's a boat there, and it's very much boating weather here in Phillip Island. It is dry, thankfully, after rain completely washed out FP1 yesterday. It was a damp start to the Saturday morning action here in MotoGP. It was dry when Jorge Martin grabbed the bull by the horns once again. The World Championship leader for Prima Pramac Ducati, a 127.296 on this newly resurfaced Phillip Island circuit, stormed to a magnificent 7th pole position of the season. Only Marc Marquez in 2nd and Maverick Vinales in 3rd were able to lap within a second of Martin's blistering pace this morning. He is a big pre-sprint favourite coming into this 13-lapper this afternoon, and of course looking to make amends for his heartache here last year, the late heartache for the Spaniard when he led for all but 8 corners of the 27-lap Australian Grand Prix, which took place on Saturday here 1 year ago, before he was swamped late on by Johann Zarco, Pecco Bagnaia, Fabio Di Gianantonio and Brad Binder. Talking you through then this historic day as we get set for our first sprint down under. Matt Burton and Lewis will be in the commentary box as always, with Simon Crowfar down in pit lane. Lewis, well, some statement lap this morning by the World Championship leader, 10 points clear, as we mentioned, Pecco Bagnaia. Bagnaia in terms of position, not really out of place on the grid, 5th on the factory Ducati, but nearly 1.2 seconds behind his closest championship rival. Bagnaya's lowest qualifying in 13 since he was 7th on the grid at the Spanish Grand Prix in Jerez. Work to do for the world champion, but as we mentioned, Jorge Martin laying down a marker this morning in tricky conditions. It's been cold, it's been windy so far today, so that 1:27.296 was something special from the Spaniard.
Immense talent and no lack of bravery from Jorge Martin this morning. When you're putting half a second into the likes of Marc Marquez, Maverick Vinales, and as you mentioned, a second plus into everybody else, you are going some. We do know from previous years that Jorge Martin just seems to have a sweet spot around this Phillip Island circuit, particularly in qualifying trim. That is a 3rd Phillip Island pole in a row, but he hasn't converted either of the previous 2 into any sort of victory. Of course, as you mentioned, we never got a sprint here last year, but we did get the main race on the Saturday afternoon where Martin led for 26 laps and 3 corners before being overtaken partway around that final lap. He starts the sprint as the runaway favourite, although don't necessarily expect him to enjoy the same kind of advantage as he does in qualifying. It is now full dry conditions, at least for the moment.
Not seeing Pecco Bagnaia so far feature inside the top 3 at any stage so far this weekend. He normally finds his form, normally comes to the fore when it really matters on Saturday and Sunday afternoons. 5th place on the grid then goes the 27-year-old Italian. That win 2 weeks ago at Motegi is 8th of the season. That's now a personal best in MotoGP. Pecco Da Vinci, well, he could do with a masterpiece, couldn't he, to make sure that he make sure that there's no loss, no big loss in terms of points here for Jorge Martin. It looks well set potentially to leave Australia with the maximum 37-point haul. Yeah, Australian fans, they're taking Pecco Bagnaia to their heart. 2nd, of course, he was here last year in that thriller to Johann Zarco. One of only 2 podiums in 9 Grand Prix. A somewhat surprising stat as we headed down under from Asia. Our 2 top riders in the World Championship, both Jorge Martin and Pecco Bagnaia, still both of them across their entire Grand Prix careers winless at this wonderful circuit.
Will that all change over the next 24 hours? Will it change in the next hour or so in the sprint? Well, Marc Marquez will certainly look to ensure that that stat carries over into tomorrow. I think if you'd asked the question at the start of the day who the favourite was going into Super Saturday, Marc Marquez would have been the answer for many across this paddock, particularly when the conditions were at their least predictable yesterday and it was changing from wet to dry. Marc Marquez had an advantage over the rest of the field. That, of course, has been eradicated as we've gone into full dry Saturday conditions. Marquez, as mentioned, over half a second in arrears of Jorge Martin, but he has a particularly good record around this circuit, a 3-time former winner, and he will certainly be looking to keep Jorge Martin more than honest this afternoon.
First front row since his fairy tale weekend on home turf at Motorland Aragon, where he converted that last front row, which was a pole position at Motorland, into a sprint and Grand Prix victory double. His first Grand Prix success in 1,043 days. Back-to-back front row starts, back-to-back 3rd places for Maverick Vinales. He'll be hoping from 3rd place here today and tomorrow in Australia. He doesn't fade out of contention as quickly as what he did in Motegi last time out. 3rd to 9th in the sprint, 3rd to a DNF in the Mobility Resort Motegi last time out for Vinales. Leading row 2, he's looked in good nick all weekend so far as Marco Bezzecchi. Was 3rd fastest in the only dry session we had on Friday. 4th quickest he was in the qualifying session this morning. Over a second though behind pole starter Jorge Martin. The 25-year-old Italian though has now qualified top 6 in 4 of his last 5 Grand Prix.
Yeah, the GP23s were 1st, 2nd and 3rd yesterday, or 3 of the 4 of them were anyway, in the form of Marc Marquez, Alex Marquez and Marco Bezzecchi. So the GP23s perhaps on a little bit more of an even footing this weekend against the all-conquering GP24. Marco Bezzecchi, as mentioned, had a very good run here to 4th back in 2022 when he actually fought his very good friend Pecco Bagnaia for the lead of the race. Jack Miller getting ready for his first ever home sprint. A donut for a boot sounds like a fair trade to me. We already saw some young fans downing a shoey yesterday, proving that that particular trend is spreading to all ages. Miller will not be lacking support this afternoon as he looks to come through from 16th on the grid.
Eventful to say the least so far in front of his home crowd for Jack Miller, paying dearly yesterday for a late crash at Siberia, losing the front at turn 6, which put him outside of that top 10, and then he missed out this morning coming out of the Q1, believe it or not, after his factory KTM slammed into an unfortunate rabbit. RIP Rabbit, I think it's fair to say. Jack Miller then leaves himself down in 16th place on the grid. If it's not the weather that can catch you out here in Phillip Island, it's certainly the local wildlife. We've had a couple of red flags, haven't we, already this weekend for some stray geese out on circuit. So yes, certainly the luck hasn't gone the way of Jack Miller so far this weekend. What can he do from 16th place on the grid? Also, one place ahead of him, another rider who paid very dearly for a late crash in that practice session yesterday. A little tip-off at turn 4 on slick tyres on the wet grass was Pedro Acosta, who really looked like he was in cruise control for much of the Q1 session, but as the track rapidly dried, as the pace hotted up on slick rubber, it was those riders, including Ralph Fernandez and Enea Bastianini, that left it to the very last laps to come through and get themselves into Q2. And what that meant was Pedro Acosta, who led so much of Q1, actually now finds himself marooned down in 15th place on the grid, back at the 5th row of the grid, and that is his lowest qualifying of what has been an incredible rookie season.
Yeah, and as you say, it was looking so good for so much of that Q1 session. The margins are fine at the best of times in MotoGP. These are the best riders in the world, but in conditions that are rapidly changing, as they have been for pretty much this entire Australian Grand Prix weekend so far, you only need to take your eye off the ball for a minute and you can plummet down the grid, and that's exactly what happened to Pedro Acosta. Both he and Jack Miller, if they are to make themselves up into the points in this sprint and potentially up into what may well be a quite large leading group, that was certainly the prediction yesterday before Jorge Martin up to face. A couple of Hondas that they will have to clear. Johan Zarco, last year's full-length Grand Prix winner, 14th, and Luca Marini, fresh from becoming a father, taking his best qualifying so far as a Repsol Honda rider.
Yeah, 13th place for Luca Marini, top Honda qualifier. Excellent job by the Italian with a 1:29.727. So Pecco Bagnaia is our sprint king of 2024 so far this season. He has won 6 sprints. Boy, would he like to add a 7th to try and make big inroads into Jorge Martin Championship League. Big ask, isn't it, coming from the middle of that second row. As we can see, still very, very cool, very chilly, the corners, because of the strong winds that are blowing in from the coastline here. Well, we've got a factory Aprilia on the front row of the grid once again. Maverick Vinales shining on the RSGP. So we can't say the same about his teammate Aleix Espargaro, who finds himself all the way down in 20th spot. Let's get some pre-sprint thoughts from their boss, Paolo Bonora, who's with Simon.
Paolo, I can really feel this cold temperature in the air. I'm curious about, will this affect anything? Tyre degradation, front tyre temperature, and your machines look like they're working really well here with Vinales on the front row and Raul Fernandez on row 2.
Yeah, for sure, Simon. Here it is a very specific track, very fast corner, fluent corner, no hard braking, so it is easier for our bike to ride very well. But in particular, because Maverick likes so much this track, we are checking the temperature, because at the moment is not so high. It is a very, very cold wind, so will be very tricky for the front tire, in particular in the first laps, to keep the tire in the correct temperature and be in the front to understand the race. It will be a very difficult race, because if you stay too much in the front with this cold wind, will be difficult to manage the front tire.
And you're speaking about the hard front tire?
Absolutely, because there is probably most of the rider with the hard on the front.
Paolo, good luck.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Thanks to Aprilia boss Paolo Bonora. 7th front row start of the season for Maverick Vinales. An excellent job, you have to say, today by Ralph Fernandez, climbing off his sick bed. Only did 11 laps in the dry session yesterday afternoon. He was laid low by a pretty nasty illness. Thankfully, whatever he was given by the MotoGP medics worked a treat overnight. Fastest in Q1, and then finds himself at the back of the second row in 6th place for Trackhouse Racing. Best qualifying in 8. Only the 3rd time this season we'll see Fernandez fire away from the top 6.
Looked a little chilly there, didn't he, on the grid as he sat there. There's the grid. As you look at that, we're going to head down to the grid. It was extremely 1-2 in practice yesterday. Marc Marquez lines up 2nd. His brother Alex starts 8th. Michele Massini's with Simon.
He is. Michele Marquez has looked so good from the very first session here this weekend, but overnight it looks like sorry, we're just getting out of the way. This grid is absolutely packed with people. It looks like overnight Jorge Martin has found something extra. What do you think can happen today?
Well, I think so far a really nice weekend. We shown the speed in every condition so far. So I think that also as we find something that we can give us more today, but we have to show for sure today also is important to take some data for the tomorrow's race, and we'll see.
You said you found something more that you think can help you in today's sprint?
Yeah, I think so.
Can you tell us what it is?
But you mean about
setup or some setting?
Yeah, something set up, also a bit of electronics, adjustment,
Good luck, thank you.
Thank you very much, Michele Massini. Thanks very much, Simon. Yeah, Marc Marquez then on the front row of the grid for just the 5th time in 17 starts as part of the Gresini Ducati project. Just a little footnote about Aprilia. We just mentioned Maverick Vinales. We saw him on screens briefly. An excellent 3rd place. Fingers and ears if you're an Aleix Espargaro fan. He really has struggled to get going so far here this weekend in Australia. 20th on the grid is the 35. It's his lowest qualifying in over 6 years, since all the way back at the Brno Grand Prix in the Czech Republic in 2018. It really has been a tough weekend so far for Aleix Espargaro. It was a magic lap, wasn't it, once again from Jorge Martin this morning. The 1:27.296 coming on the very next lap after he'd almost crashed, losing the front at turn 9 into Lukey Heights. 3 successive poles here then now in Phillip Island for the World Championship leader. Let's get some thoughts from the boss, Gino Borsoi.
Gino, I know it was just qualifying, but Jorge looked absolutely fantastic out there today. What do you think he can do today? It looks like he can run away.
Oh, well, I don't know if we were able to run away, but honestly speaking, the fastest lap we were so strong, honestly. But on pace, I saw we have no big difference compared to Marquez, for example, or Pecco. So let's see. Conditions are quite tricky. A lot of wind, especially in the first corner, become difficult for them, especially at the first laps when the front tire is cold. So they have to pay attention. And then let's see.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks to Gino Borsoi. Of course, the memories of what happened to Jorge Martin here last year surely will be fresh in their minds in one of very fresh conditions here in Phillip Island. Glance out of our commentary box window out into the distance towards the Bass Strait, just behind Siberia corner up at turn 6, and you can see up behind Pecco Bagnaia there, it's looking rather grey and gloomy around here again. The sun was out earlier on in the day. It's kind of hidden back behind the clouds again. We hope that no wet weather is heading our way to interfere with this sprint. You can never say with much certainty that it's going to stay dry for very long here in Phillip Island. We found that out not only to our cost last year when the Tissot sprint was cancelled, but we've already seen that on many occasions this weekend already. First free practice yesterday was cancelled altogether due to incessant heavy rain, and practice in the afternoon eventually took place in dry conditions, but didn't exactly start in the driest of conditions as well. We're just over 5 minutes away now from the warm-up lap. 13 laps ahead of us, and are these the 13 laps where Enea Bastianini finally drops out of World Championship contention? He had to go through Q1 altogether this morning, and given the rapidly improving conditions, it wasn't exactly an easy passage through to Q2 for Enea Bastianini. He did, though, make it through He only made it, though, as far as 10th place on the grid, and his already very slim title hopes have got even slimmer over the course of this Phillip Island weekend.
Yeah, no podium in the 2 Grand Prix since that unbelievable last lap victory in the Emilia-Romagna round over Jorge Martin. That's when we thought that the Beast was forcing himself right back in the championship contention. But the DNF in Mandalika really did, you feel, deal a terminal blow to his championship aspirations. 4th place last time out in Motegi as well, just could not get through on Marc Marquez. Could he just 2 points, splitting those two in the battle of a third in the championship, as Jorge Martin then gets himself ready. Jack Miller, how many layers has Miller got on here to protect himself from the very cool conditions? Yeah, I suppose if anybody knows how chilly and cool it can be in this part of the world, it is Jack Miller, just getting himself psyched up, getting himself warmed up. A lot of work to do for Miller from 16th place on the grid, although we do know that we tend to have big group races here in Phillip Island. If you can get away in the slipstream with a lack of hard braking that breaks up the field, then sometimes you can, if you can get dragged along in that freight train, get yourself right in contention. So don't discount the likes of Acosta and Miller, who are coming from way down the grid. And
add to that the point made by Paolo Bonora to Simon on the grid. He said perhaps riders won't want to lead early on. I'm sure Jorge Martin will be keen to, but the cool breeze that's coming in off the back straight, hitting your front tyre, can make it very, very easy to lose the front. Usually we see in MotoGP races, you don't want to immediately follow someone because you don't want the hot air on your front tyre. They might be quite keen for some of it this afternoon.
So Marc Marquez, second in that classic Australian Grand Prix 2 years ago. It was his 100th Premier Class podium. But it is all eyes on Jorge Martin as he looks to build on that narrow 10-point lead in the World Championship over the last 2 Grand Prix in Mandalika and in Motegi. Jorge Martin has seen Bagnaia creep back towards him. He's closed in by 14 points. The gap was 24, wasn't it, after the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix? Not helped by one of Bagnaia's 17. Now, so that gives you an indication of just how blustery it is here in Phillip Island. Simon, quickly down to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you and the listeners know I've spoken to a few crew chiefs, asked them about tyre management if it's needed in this 13-lap sprint, and they were mentioning that the soft tyre this year is the medium tyre from last year, and they believe they won't have to manage it. So this literally will be a sprint, even though the circuit's really hard on tyres. It's more about managing the temperature of the front tyre and then judging after this sprint if the tyres have no blisters, if they can also run that same tyre for the long race tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Simon. Of course, we do know how pivotal, how crucial time management will be a factor in tomorrow's 27-lap Grand Prix. Just rewatched last year's Aussie Grand Prix to see how that hurt Jorge Martin. Middle of the second row of the grid then goes Pecco Bagnaia and the factory Ducati. Already 14 wins so far this season. Maverick Vinales, back-to-back front rows in Japan and here in Australia. Marc Marquez, his first front row start in the last 5 Grand Prix since his Aragon pole position. But it is Jorge Martin who produced more Q2 magic this morning here in Australia. He goes from pole.